Hi, everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of Keiko Talks. Caitlin and I are so excited to be starting this podcasting journey and to be sharing it with you guys. So, wherever you're listening, please get cozy, settle in for the next hour or so. We've got a great discussion coming for you. Tonight's episode is all about the education system, specifically higher education. As recent grads, Caitlin and I both have had a lot of time over the last few years to really think about whether college or just, the American education system as a whole has truly benefited us or not. So, thinking about massive amounts of college debt. Can you get the right job? Can you even get into the field you actually want to get into? Am I just crippled with anxiety and depression coming out of school? All those topics are things we want to be talking about for the next hour or so. So, like I said, get your coffee, get your wine, whatever you drink, get your water if you're, a non-alcohol like me. If you don't drink alcohol like me, settle in for the next hour or so because that's what we're going to be discussing. All right, Caitlin, before we start, you want to give us a little rundown on your educational background, kind of what classes you took, if you felt like you were like tracked or just kind of how school was for you. What was your school experience like in America?
So my school experience was pretty diverse, I'd say, in an aspect. So the good thing about like our schooling was that we went to a pretty decent school for the most of our years. It's concerning like elementary, middle, and high school. So we'll break it down a little bit. Elementary school was pretty okay. So I was pretty in like standard classes at that point. I don't know if you can take advanced classes then, but standard classes through elementary school, nothing special. The only thing that was different would be first grade. I went to a school that was a little more, I guess you could say like underserved. And it was in the first grade. That's a pivotal year in a student's schooling. However, I did not learn anything that year, like nothing. So good thing my mom was in education. So she was able to teach me everything I needed to know so I could go to second grade and be fine. So that's what elementary school. Middle school, pretty standard. Didn't take any special classes or anything like that. High school, pretty standard. I did end up going to a center which provided AP classes for me, as well as taking some AP classes in just like the normal curriculum as far as education, the education system is concerned. However, I will say that now that I've gone to college and now I'm in the real world, in hindsight, I didn't find that the education system was really that like beneficial. It didn't really teach me things that I needed to know for life. Like it just set me up to be a working citizen of America and to be, under corporate America. However, I just feel like that's just not beneficial today. I feel like we should be raising people to be independent. We should be raising people to have businesses, to be entrepreneurs. To me, the education system has become glorified babysitting. So even going into like my college education, I went to a school that really didn't provide any challenges, really, other than like the field that I was kind of in. But it was very just like show up. It was an extension of high school, not really like a college atmosphere, not thriving thought, not thriving critical thinking. Driving critical thinking. So it was just, an extension of glorified babysitting of adults trying to figure out life. So yeah, that's my schooling experience. What about yours, Courtney?
Yeah, it's so funny because Caitlin and I obviously grew up in the same house. We're twins, but our education experiences were similar but also different. Like Caitlin was explaining, early elementary school, I always had good teachers. Even at the school that was underserved and was like less privileged, I had a teacher who was really invested in her students, and she was really the one rare teacher at that school who was invested and like really taught us to read. She gave us different levels of reading. Like she noticed that me and a couple other students were like really getting the hang of reading, early on. So she separated us and gave us a special group to basically read harder material, even in the first grade when we had her. So I would characterize my entire schooling experience as being tracked. And for those of you who do not understand what tracking means, that means all the like AP classes, accelerated classes, like basically starting at a young age saying, okay, well, this student seems to have some seems to be, quote, gifted. We need to talk about that too, because that's another issue.
Yeah.
But gifted. So, they recognize early on, like, all right, this student is gifted. So they put them in all these like harder, quote, harder courses. They put them in all these special classes, all from middle school, from elementary to middle to high school. So you end up getting funneled to these bigger, more prestigious, academically rigorous, schools. And really, I have to just say I was tracked because I went from elementary school where, I started out in those reading groups, which are harder, right? Or like reading more difficult material. We would even be reading on our own without the teacher's help, that kind of thing, like separated from the bigger class. And then I get to middle school. I'm still in those accelerated classes. I'm taking like the honors English classes. And then I think we had like honors math and social studies. I was in all those classes. And then I moved, then high school, I was definitely in honors. I was in honors and AP. Even in middle school, I was taking some AP classes. Was I taking AP in middle school?
I don't think they have AP in middle school.
No, I'm lying. I didn't take any AP, but I was in honors, which you had to have prerequisite honors to even get into AP for high school.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was taking definitely AP. My freshman year of high school, I was taking AP classes. And then the last 2 years of high school, I was in IB, which is its own program. If you don't know what IB is, it's International Baccalaureate. But it's its own program, which is much more rigorous than the American pretty much standard curriculum. So, and then for college, I went to Wake Forest University, which is a school that has I think like a 25% acceptance rate, something like that. So it's a school that they deny more people than they accept. We'll just say that. So it's one of those schools. It's I call it a semi Ivy League school. I would say it's probably like a step under Duke, if you think about that academically. So yeah, looking back, I can say I was tracked. At the time I thought like, oh, I'm just pushing myself. I'm just, doing this. I'm just, and that's true. But I was like separated from the bunch. But when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, it's like, why are we separating? It creates this like division of like smart kids, the less smart kids. And I remember even growing up, people just saying like, oh, you're in the smart people classes, you're in the this classes. And it was like, well, I'm proud of being, capable and being able to take on those harder, quote, harder material. But like, I don't know. It's in the grand scheme of things, it's like, was it really worth it? Because yeah, I might have got into a fancy school, but like I'm still struggling today as an adult. So like was Wake Forest worth it? I don't know.
So that brings me to like a question for you, because I feel like I took, basically all throughout elementary and middle school, I took just regular classes, nothing special. Do you feel like with you being in the classes that were a little bit more advanced and or the classes that were basically tracking you, do you feel like your classes were more centered towards understanding and applying material or more towards like test taking?
Honestly, it was both because, AP classes, and you took some AP classes too, like you were spending your time preparing for that test, period, point blank. You spend the entire time preparing for that test.
The entire year was for that one test.
The entire year for that one test. Same thing with IB. Like IB, you took two years worth of courses, and then at the very end of those 2 years, you took 2 weeks worth of tests, basically. So we had like collectively 7 or 8 exams. 6 or 7 exams or something that we had to take for each of the courses that we were studying, for those 2 years. So it was like everything was about that test and passing that test. And it was like, honestly, like the methods they were using to teach us were more, like Socratic methods and trying to apply the material versus just memorizing. But it was like at the end of the day, we had to sit down and take a test to try to get the scores to make the school look good.
And honestly, like with taking AP classes, like I can't regurgitate any of the information. You know what I mean? Like it was literally like copy and just like vomit all the information on the AP exam and hope for the best.
Exactly. Yeah. So. And it was stress inducing. I don't know if you remember when I was taking those IB exams.
Yeah.
Do you have any recollection of that? But like,
I thought you just like studied, like you were just like in a hole, like studying, like
for like a couple weeks, really a couple months, weeks at a time. Weeks, and it was like stress inducing. I look back at it and I'm like, 18-year-old me was really stressed out about like these exams,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. And then they
And it
also
was
put that
like,
pressure on you, like, oh, you're not going to get into college if you don't do so and so and so. And it's just like, it doesn't help that teachers add that extra pressure on as well, you know?
exactly. Yeah. It's like, I don't know. Caitlin and I came up with this topic because we were like, is education, putting it kind of in the terms of like anti-intellectualism versus
Mm-hmm.
not being, or like, should we emphasize being an intellectual or not in our society? And it's like, I wholeheartedly feel like I've benefited from going to college. I really do. But I absolutely see its pitfalls now that I'm outside of it. You know what I
Exactly.
mean?
Yeah. And I feel like if you're not doing certain things going into college, it really can set you up for not being successful just because of like, for example, you go into college, right? And a lot of people have a bunch of debt coming out of college. You know what I mean? So that's just like one thing. You come out of college, if you're not making a certain amount of money to pay said debt, excuse me, have already been set up. You know what I mean? On top of like living expenses.
Exactly.
So it's just like, don't be wrong, is college beneficial? Does it allow you to, um, explore a field maybe that you're passionate about and all that good stuff like that? Yeah, but I feel like you also have to be very strategic about college. And that's what they fail to teach you. 18-year-old me did not know to be strategic about college. 25-year-old me now knows that.
Mm,
But they definitely don't, they just want you to apply. And that may be why they target 18-year-olds to go into college because they know they can like
exactly.
get anything out of them.
You know what's so funny? I was on Twitter today and I saw something that was like really the truth. It was like the biggest recruiting tool that the military has or the US Army has is uh showing everybody like school debt or like kind of trying to like throw shade on school debt, being like,
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to be in debt, so come join the military. And that's like,
Yeah.
that's such a sick way.
Mm-hmm.
But on it, then I thought about like, that is exactly what they tell
Oh,
students.
yeah.
They go to like school cafeterias, and I remember seeing them at our school cafeteria for
Yep.
like
You certainly
the
do.
college fair, and they will be like, you don't want all that debt. Come join the
Mm-hmm.
military. And it's like, okay, but you're selling your body out to the US government. Like,
Mm-hmm.
which one is it, you know?
You really don't know what you're signing up for by doing that. So
Exactly.
So I also did a little research. And so, according to Southern New Hampshire University, these are the top 10 reasons why you should go to college. So I'm going to read a couple out and see, tell me what you think, Courtney. So, college graduates earn more money on average.
Do I think You know what? I think I read that too for some of the research I did, and I
Mm-hmm.
think it's like over your lifetime you earn more on average, which
Yeah.
is like, you hate to say it, but like that doesn't directly impact my life now.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's like, yes, when I'm older and I can look back and say, I made 500,000 more dollars in comparison to somebody who might have blah blah blah. But truth be told, that 500 something more thousand dollars probably was dispersed and spent on paying back student loan, paying
Exactly.
back like paying for a car, paying for a house,
Which is really
doing all
not
these
making
things that
more
I'm
if you just
like,
are in debt.
yeah, it's like if I was really, I mean, I probably am dollar amount have the more earning potential to get a quote higher paying job, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like if that money just ends up being put back into, you know, things that I'm indebted for, whether it be student loans, a house, college, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
then it's not like it's in my pocket and I have a higher net worth. I don't. I just quote made more money on paper. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Okay, so these three kind of go together. So it says earn a college education, you could live a longer life. It also means better health and it could boost your happiness.
I think, some of those are like the intangibles, like
Mm-hmm.
things you can't really put into a dollar amount. I think that that probably is connected to, if you have more money, then you can live a happier life. Like that's what capitalism is. Like the more money
Yeah.
you have, the more access you have to live a better life. Seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's probably tied to earning more money over, your lifespan, more than just I got this, degree, and so therefore I am somehow happier.
Yeah, for
Just,
sure.
by virtue of having a degree. I think it has to probably connect back to money.
Yeah. And I also think too that like while that may be true, I think that when you go into a college environment and or seeking out higher education in general, whether it's college or a technical school, it gives you more of well, first of all, college, only certain people are going to college. You know what I mean? People who want to know more and to want to learn more, right? To a certain extent. But it also gives you kind of like, I guess you could say kind of like a critical thinking skill to like analyze this is going to benefit me or not. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So maybe that's where that's stemming from. So
yeah, I think that is the biggest intangible I think I got from college.
mm-hmm.
The biggest, real life lesson was think critically. Your life is your own, so make of it what you will. And despite whatever the government says, whatever is the standard, you have all of the skills now to survive, thrive, and live the way you want to live on your own. College really, really instills that in you if you go to the right college.
Yeah. And see, like I didn't go to a college that really promoted critical thinking, unfortunately. So I didn't really get that in college. I think the good thing about, being raised in a household, my mom was in education. She taught us critical thinking from like a parenting standpoint. So that is why I have that critical thinking skill. And maybe even, doing like the AP classes and stuff that I did in high school. But college did not foster that for me at all. It did not foster critical thinking. It was basically like going to like your regular classes in high school, and it was just a college version of that. Like it was literally glorified babysitting. It did not promote critical thinking at all.
And that's the thing is like not all college educations are going to be the same. So, I happen to like kind of halfway luck up school, so I think that helps too. But so I was, really encouraged to expand, do things, try things, and make my own way while I was in college. And not every school is like that. So
for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about.
So when do you think you should like attend college? Like I personally think that like I would have probably benefited if I would have taken maybe like a gap year. So a gap year is when you take that 1 year off after you graduate high school into going into college. Because I feel like right after high school, like I just was not prepared. I probably would have made a sounder decision on the college I went to if I would have taken like a little year to like get it together, plan a little bit, get my life together, save a little money. You know what I mean? It also could help alleviate debt as well. So I think me personally, I'm a fan of a gap year. If I have kids, I'm definitely like, take a gap year if you need it. What do you think?
Yeah. You know what? I wholeheartedly agree. And 18-year-old me couldn't be in being like one of the smart kids or being one of those like academically gifted kids. So I would have said at the time, absolutely not, never. Go straight to college, get into a career, make money, and do what you want to do for the rest of your life. That was absolutely me. And the universe, God, whatever, has just a way of really humbling you, and he certainly did. The universe certainly humbled me. Okay,
he certainly did.
He certainly did. Because the day I graduated, it was like life check for you, okay? But
right.
But yeah, so I think a gap year actually, I don't know, in my case, I think Wake was probably the best fit for me because I do feel like Wake really was a good little bubble for me to be in at that time in my life. So I think Wake still would have been like my quote dream school regardless, I think. But I wish I would have. What I realize now is I didn't do the research into as many colleges as I could have applied to.
Exactly.
I could have definitely looked into more scholarships. I could have definitely looked into more schools that had probably programs that were more fitted to film and art. But I mean, it was almost sort of serendipitous that I went to Wake because if I hadn't gone to Wake and went to like a film program, which is what I probably would have wanted to do. I'm a filmmaker, by the way, if I didn't mention that on here, but I'm a filmmaker. So that was always my intention, even, 18 years old, that was my intention. But so if I would have went to like more of a standard filmmaking program, like something like UCLA or NYU or, something like that, I don't think I would have developed my specific taste as an artist because I really got into at Wake more video art. So I got into the more conceptual art side of it, and that really informs even like the more like narrative film working that I do now. So I don't I don't think Wake was a wash at all. Like I think that it happened the way it was supposed to happen for me. But I wish I would have, you know, did some more research because Wake was kind of one of the only like it was like Wake and Duke were the ones I was like riding on. I didn't get to Duke. So and I got into Wake. So I was like, all right, it's where we're going. And I'm like,
Facts.
I should have, applied to I should have tried for NYU. I should have shot at like, you know, Dartmouth or those sort of schools too. Like I should have really did the research, but like I said, I was so the education system IB was kind of kicking my behind at that time when I was trying to apply for colleges, and it was like I couldn't do anything else but apply to the 3-4 school that I did and move on.
Yeah,
That's all I had
seriously.
time to do at that time, really.
I feel that. Yeah, because I only applied to like a couple schools. I think I applied to like USC, and I think I
Mhm.
applied to CSU. And I was like, I got my first letter from CSU, and I was like, that's where I'm going. And like,
Yeah,
if I, you know what I mean? Because I mean, on top of, and I think in that point, I was also working pretty much
yeah,
full time at that point. Um, and by choice, I didn't have to. I just chose to work. And so, it was just like a lot of things going on. It was just like, that's like, check that off the list and move on. You know what I mean?
exactly. Yeah,
So I was just, I wish I would have made that more of a priority because I definitely, like, wholeheartedly would have went to a different school that benefited me. And or if I would have went, I would have transferred out quickly.
yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree because you watch those videos online. You see the kids who like get into certain schools are like reaction to getting into my top 5
Mm-hmm.
Ivies. And like I think those videos are kind of BS. But
I
like
agree.
I do think but I look at that and I'm like, they were really aware of the curriculum of those schools even at
Yeah.
their age. And I could have been, but I wasn't because I was still in that high school, take the test, study the material, take the
Mm-hmm.
test, get the grade. We were all of that was happening at the same time that we also had to submit these college applications. And you know how long it takes to do a college application?
Right.
That's its own sort of
Test.
test. Yeah. So
Oof.
like, so we really, honestly, it was like, that's all the best I could do was get
Yeah,
my
seriously.
Wake and Duke applications out there. I think I applied to FSU, but and I applied to USC too, as well as Furman. And I ultimately ended up going to Wake because Wake had the most scholarship money to offer me because the rest of the schools like weren't offering like much of anything at all. So
Anything.
I was like,
Tell me about it.
Wake is really Wake is the option for me. And I'm like, thank God. And I didn't know anything about Wake until they sent me some stuff in the mail about like apply to our schools because that's what they do now.
Mm-hmm.
They like seek out the students and then,
Yeah. All
you
right.
know,
Phew.
yeah.
Odd.
So it's kind of like this. It's like I don't know. It's like weird advertising. But I also, in my case, and this was kind of serendipity. I think it was totally absolutely meant for me to go to Wake because I had a teacher who also went to Wake Forest at my, small hometown, kind of in the backwoods. We had my economics teacher in the IB program, so a very specific program that only like 20 kids were in. She went to Wake. And so she always mentioned Wake to us. And then once I started getting those emails, I was like, I reached out to her and I was like, can you, write me a letter of recommendation and like all of that. So Wake was really oddly serendipitous for me. I will say that happened. There's a lot of little like moments of like kismet that led up to me actually going to Wake in the
Mm-hmm.
end, oddly enough.
Yeah, I feel that.
So yeah, but what the question was about gap years. I think a gap year would have been beneficial. But I think I got my gap year on the back end after I graduated college. I think that's when I had my
True.
gap years.
Very
And,
true.
maybe that's kind of the design too. But I ended up having some time to really transition and work and do what Caitlin kind of did earlier than I did. I did that after college. And, that's a different that's a different experience, I think.
For sure. Yeah. And I think also too, like coming out of college and experience it is, 18-year-old me, because I was not as wise, clearly, versus out of college. You have a little bit more on you experience life in a way, right? You have a little
Yeah.
bit more on your belt. So
Ideally, but then you also, the other danger of that is you go into college and they kind of build you up for the real world to just tear you right back down.
Right. Yeah. The real
So
world is humbling, honey. Whew.
yeah, you almost have this sort of like entitlement coming out of college. Oh, I'm not gonna
Yeah.
call it full on entitlement, but there's an expectation that, okay, I achieved something in my life,
Mm-hmm.
and you feel like, okay, the world is supposed to open up for me now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think
And that's not how the real world works. It opens up when it's ready to open up for you.
exactly. And I think also too, like I had that expectation. I would graduate college and then all these opportunities would come flooding to me. And it's been like crickets, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um, Partly because I think where I lived. But at the same time, like that brings me to is, you now need a master's degree to do anything. The
Mhm.
bachelor's degrees pretty much it's just like a high school diploma. It just gets you to that next step, but it really isn't doing you any good. It's not really serving you any purpose besides just like labor jobs and or basic jobs where you don't even need a degree. So it's like, for me specifically, if you want to do anything in the public health field, so a little background, I went to Charleston Southern University. I got my bachelor's in public health. But if you want to do anything in public health, you got to have that master's. You got to have it, or
Yeah.
it's just like there's no purpose for you. You know what I mean? Or you got to have years and years of experience. But how am I going to get
Yeah.
that coming out of college? You know?
And then,
So
well, you know what? I think I have the opposite problem. But go ahead and finish what you were saying. But I think I actually, because of my field, I think I have the opposite problem.
yeah, no, I'm finished. But yeah, it's annoying.
I think, and I hear Caitlin, because I think that is very true, especially for those like, fields in like health or even law or whatever. Like,
Hmm.
you really do have to go get that post secondary education. You can't just BA and then call it a day.
Yeah.
That rhymed. But I I for me, going into an art field or going into a more creative field, you having that education almost makes people side eye you for being like, "Oh, you think you are better than," right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is bull. But it's like, you know, people see your connections, your work as much more, that holds more value than where you went to school. And trying, especially if you're trying to get into the film industry, the traditional Hollywood film industry, of having a fancy degree, fancy art, quote, what they call fancy, like degree, just sort of makes you seem like some like snobby kid who doesn't actually know what they're talking about. They just read books, right?
For sure.
So it's funny how different, fields that you want to enter into, what their take on higher education actually is, because the fields that, the work that I've done, my degree has almost, I'm not saying it's totally worked against me, like people recognize it, but it's not shooing me in any faster or making things any really easier. If anything, they're like, oh, well, you're smart. So we'll hand you more work to do,
Yeah.
or we'll hand you the stuff we either don't know how to do or don't want to do,
Mm-hmm.
like you end up becoming the brain for people basically.
For
And
sure.
I do a lot of like writing jobs and just more creative jobs, so that ends up, it feels sort of like, dang, was this even worth it? Because reality is you meet people who never even like, who barely skated out of high school and make 3-4 times your income. You're just like, what?
Mm-hmm.
you know and it's all because of like experience and networking and all like those intangibles that college doesn't, a degree does not automatically give. It's still, I mean,
Exactly.
you still have to go out and hustle, and that was kind of the biggest, that was something I really had to like get over. That you got to go out and hustle. It's not about just getting that degree and getting a piece of paper you know
So would you say that's like one of the major cons to going to college is like you go in with this idea that you're going to come out and you're going to, have some level of success. And then it's like, nope, life just hits you and you're like, and then on top of life hitting you, um, you have, the debt from college. You have maybe not even getting a job that can even pay to support said debt. You know what I mean?
I think, I mean, I guess you could call it a con, but I really wish it was something that people just explain up front. It's kind
Yeah,
of like it's like reading the terms and conditions
for
on
sure.
like when you get like the Apple terms and conditions. It's like, okay, now we're gonna give you this fancy device, but it may or may not explode in the future. Like
Exactly.
that, I wish that it just was explained more, it was pushed more.
For sure.
And instead of the narrative, I mean, the overwhelming narrative in our society is if you go to college, you made it.
Mhm.
You're one step away from success, comfort, you'll have the American dream, you'll have XYZ. And I think that that is one path that can happen, but more often than not, is gonna be what you put into it is what you get out of it.
For sure.
And I wish that was explained to me a little bit more because I just kind of I followed what was really told to me, what was pushed to me,
For
you
sure. I
know.
agree with that. I do think it's kind of like a little false hope kind of thing. And they like tell you go to college and you are guaranteed a good job. You're guaranteed this life and stuff. And that may be fine. But I think also too that like, if it was clear that it's not immediately, and or you may have to go back and get your master's degree, and or you may have to do, X, Y, and Z, then I probably would have made a different decision. Like I would have went to a tech school, you know what I mean, for 2 years, and then integrated into like a 4-year program or something like that, just for like financial reasons. But like for when I went to college, I understood it at the point of if I go, then I have a good career coming out. I can make a livable wage. I can, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
definitely a little false hope there.
Yeah. And it's not that it's necessarily a con. It's like I wish before I got into it, I wish I would have considered that a lot more than what I did because I
Yeah,
I didn't consider it fully. I just sort of I
for
don't know.
sure. And
I
these
just
colleges aren't telling you this either. So
yeah,
that
no,
to me,
because
that's
it
like,
doesn't help sell it. That
yeah,
does
at
not
all.
help sell it. If
Mm-mm,
you say,
mm-mm.
well, you might get a job versus you
Mm-hmm.
absolutely will, versus putting on the brochure, these are the students who all work at NBC now. These are all the students who work at Disney
Uh-huh.
now.
Yeah,
Not
be
the,
realistic about it. Like those
yeah,
are
because
the exceptions. And those people may have, have graduated 20 odd years ago and they just made it to
exactly.
NBC.
Exactly. That's
So
what I'm saying. Because it doesn't look nearly as cool, as sexy as John went to, graduated in '82 and just now got the position at NBC. Like, you know what I mean?
exactly.
That's not
Mm-hmm.
nearly as, that's not going to sell it. You're just going to say John
At
is
all.
working now at NBC, like,
Mm-hmm.
so, or the people, another experience I have is like Wake is one of those elitist schools. So the people who really did come out of college and go straight to those jobs, mom and dad did work at NBC 20 years ago, and now they have
Mm-hmm.
a connection and easy in. Versus me, I'm coming out, really out of the mud. Like, side note, this is why it's important to support independent artists or independent business owners because a lot of us are just trying to get it out of the mud. Not mom and dad handing us money, not, a connection, no, nothing, nobody. We are like really actively doing this to get out of the mud. So it's important that people support and spread the word.
For sure.
Anyways. But yeah, that's something I think about too is like they can't sell it that way because if they sold it as well, not guaranteed, then who would buy that? Who's gonna spend thousands and thousands of dollars on a maybe?
Mm-mm, I don't, yeah. And I think also too to like bring that point back is also if the price of college was told up front,
Yeah.
I really think people would be rethinking as well. Because if you would have told me that I would have came out with a certain amount of debt, um, I definitely would have rethought, you know what I mean? Or found other avenues to pay for said colleges. Now looking like I know that you can look up and find grants and scholarships and stuff like that to cover a lot of things. And I'm talking about things that are not as well known. So, like for you minorities, as you may not know, me and Courtney are African American. So like, finding things for us because we're African Americans, or like maybe because we're twins or blah blah blah, like random things that you can get scholarships and grants for. I wish I would have known that because I would have been going so hard to find those things,
Yeah.
so I wouldn't come out with as much debt, as well as if I would have known that I would have came out with as much debt, I definitely would have rethought.
Exactly. You know what? That brings up a really good topic. Black students and educational attainment. You brought up, black scholarships and things like that.
Mhm.
But um, you know, even right now, and people don't realize this, is that there really is still a huge disparity in our nation of the difference between white students getting an education and black students getting higher education.
Mm-hmm.
So I read somewhere, and people have been saying this for years that Black women are the biggest minority group to achieve college education, which is great, fantastic. And just looking at my college campus, I noted that. I was like, who, besides not unfortunately, but besides the athletes, I would say Black women, of the Black people, it was like Black women really doing the work, And I'm not saying that the athletes weren't, but like I just noticed on campus, I was like, academically, unrelated to sports, I noticed there were just more Black women. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you
I would
noticed
agree
that.
with that. I
That
think
was me.
outside of sports at CSU, you saw a lot of African American women really going hard for their degree and working for
Yeah,
that
that's saying Wake
education.
too. That's all saying with Wake too is like outside of sports, if you take athletes out of it,
Mm-hmm.
it just strictly Black students there academically, it was like I would notice more Black women being there, like for
For
the
sure.
degree. You know what I mean?
For sure.
So I think that's true for our community. Is like we Black women. I actually wholeheartedly believe that statistic. Um, but the other thing that I noted is that what they say is that though Black women are like highest earning minority group, there's still a the biggest pay gap is between Black women and like white men and white women. So
Mm-hmm.
even once you get that degree, you're still not making as much money as a white person with the same degree. So that continues to create inequalities in our society. So we're not really catching up. We're proving that we're just as smart as them, that we can work just as hard as them, that we can put the work in just as much as them, if not
Mm-hmm.
probably more, because 9 times out of 10, when a Black person goes and achieves a degree, you went through 3, 4, 5 more obstacles to get there than a white person did on
Absolutely.
average.
On
Yeah.
top of like most Black students are, even in more debt than your said, you know, Caucasian
Yeah.
individual. So, there's so many other things that come with being a Black student and seeking out, higher education. Then your countermates for you to come out and you are not able to obtain jobs
Exactly.
and equal pay,
Exactly. And you go to when you go to these jobs, you're immediately faced with either discrimination,
Mm-hmm.
microaggressions in the workplace, harassment in the workplace, all sorts of things that come at you just because you are a Black woman, and then you're not getting paid enough. You're not getting paid at least what the white people who had the same degree make, and you have more debt. So it's like it makes it feel like, especially for Black women, that like really was this worth it? I'm sure white people have those conversations, but it's also like if the average white person is gonna make their money back or make their whatever back, then it's less of a it feels like less of a loss. It's like
Yeah.
we do something to really get ahead, and that's the narrative is, oh well, you just need to work hard, get ahead, work hard, get ahead, and that's what Black women have been doing since we've been in this nation. Work hard to get ahead,
Mm-hmm.
to be given the least, and
Yep.
it
To
it
given
just
the floor to eat.
given the floor to eat, or literally giving someone's behind to kiss, or
Yep.
someone having to like clean up behind somebody. It's like it's exhausting. I know
100%.
my first job out of college is definitely a place where I held had one probably one of the only people in the building having the highest education, was being paid one of the least, and I'm doing a job that is an intellectual professional job. So I'm doing something that is requiring, quote, more intellect or higher level thinking, by being paid the least and being, disrespected while at work. So I 100% see that these things in the real world, and it's because we're getting these degrees, we're like achieving something by white standards, only to be for them to like move the finish line, or they continue
Mm-hmm.
to oppress in
Exactly. That's
another way.
exactly
And
what it feels like.
it's just effed up. It's like, and then the only way to really combat that, I think, is to just do your own thing and do what makes you happy, do what makes you, passionate. And that's why I know Catelyn did this too, but that's why I just jumped full force into filmmaking and artwork, because I was like, I'll be damned if I'm, sitting on this job getting paid pennies, you know, stressing out about even being in the same building as some of these people, and I'm not doing, at least doing something I want to do on the side and pursuing my actual passion. So I was like, F it, I'm going
And
for it.
that's
Period.
exactly why I think that it's important for like high schools and stuff to be teaching entrepreneurship and
Mm-hmm.
things outside of just, going to college and being, a part of corporate America. Because first of all, corporate America is not really serving majority of people anymore. Unless you're
Mm-hmm.
something or someone of corporate America, it's not serving the lower levels that are participating in corporate America. So,
Mm-hmm.
you go to college and you're making, barely anything to make in meets with the price of living and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, they set this bar and then it's not even accomplishable.
Yeah. Or
So
it's
it's
you
beyond
accomplish the bar and
frustrating.
then they move the bar.
Yeah.
Black women have always risen to the bar.
Well, yeah,
Always
I
gotten
agree
to,
with that.
they just move the bar once you actually start. Once you grab onto the bar
Mm,
and can handle it, they just move it because they really
yeah,
don't want equity.
at all.
They just
No.
don't want
And
equity.
so do you think it's like, and maybe in like high school, they had a course, like me in high school, I took a class on personal finance.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say out of any class that I've ever taken in high school, out of my AP classes, my my center classes that I took, those were specific in like the health um, area curriculum. Personal finance was the best class I've ever taken. Mind you, that class I did not choose. I got kind of thrown into it because of the special classes that I was taking at the center. But
Mm-hmm.
that was the best classes and the class that I've used till this day. It taught me, how to manage my money, about the stock market, about some things about college briefly, managing money and stuff, like things that are really important.
Mm-hmm.
Not, you know, are you going to pass an AP class for chemistry? Like, and that serves me no good unless I want to be a chemist.
Exactly. Yeah.
No good.
And I agree with you. I think that personal finance class would have absolutely benefited me. I never took it. I didn't even know it existed.
Mm-hmm.
But I think some things like that are things that are absolutely would be, is like that's preparing you for real world, real life. That's something you can
Exactly.
actually tangibly say, all right, this is gonna go into my life today to make it better. And another class I think they should teach, um, and they're starting to kind of get onto this now, especially with things like critical race theory being talked about. We'll see if
Yeah,
that actually happens. But I think there needs to be a civics class where they're really teaching the basics of sociology and they're teaching ethics.
for
And I know that
sure.
sounds so simple and that sounds so whatever, but I really don't think you understand, like, some people who come out of high school and like don't go, do higher education or don't expand themselves. Not that expanding your automatically an ethical person, not saying that. But if you never go, if you just if you never ever have any exposure to that, then you wouldn't believe some of the unethical, just totally like sort of ignorant. I can't even imagine what somebody else's perspective might be. The
Mm-hmm.
that type of person exists for real time,
For sure.
and they are frankly everywhere. And it's like, at
Mm-hmm.
least if they're introduced to the idea of like, in sociology there's a thing called cumulative disadvantage, which is basically the problem with black culture, not our culture, but how we have to exist is like years of disadvantage of not having access to resources, not having access to education, being like given debt. All of that compounds generationally to create the issues that we see today in our black community. If we
Absolutely.
understood that stuff early on in like high school, if we
Mm-hmm.
understood how to interact with people of different races, cultures, all that stuff in like a civics course or just a course that really explained some of those basic sociology, how our society works,
And especially
you
in those
know,
pivotal years where you are able to mold and change and become this, kind of like not decide your identity, but you know what I mean? Like figure out your morals and values and stuff like that. Versus when those classes are offered in college and or you're mandated to take those in college, first of all, not everybody's going to college. So not everybody
Exactly.
has that, for one. And for
Exactly.
two, at that point in college, like I kind of thought I knew everything. I'm grown all of a sudden. And so I was not receptive to that information. Now that I'm out of college and I'm figuring out the real world, now I want to use that information and apply it to my life. And also me being African American, aka a minority, um, I that those things apply to my life daily.
Exactly.
So, you
Yeah, and
know,
I think something like that, like, because, most people at least finish high school. Like, I think the vast majority of Americans finish high school, like 80 something percent, right? So
mhm.
most Americans have finished some level of high school. So, that would reach a bigger and broader audience of people. It would introduce, things like sociology, like empathy, like that kind of stuff
Mhm.
in a classroom setting where at least people know that this exists and it's not some like foreign concept,
Yeah.
you know, that somebody in interpersonal relationship with somebody would have to explain to you, like, you know what I mean? Because
Mhm.
I just can't tell you how many times I've interacted with people, post college or even in college who I'm like, you genuinely do not get the concept that there is somebody else in the world having another experience
Mhm.
of this. Like, and that always gets me because I'm like, I just was not raised that way. Like, I
Yeah.
I'm not saying I always think about other people's perspective, but I certainly don't go around just saying the kind of off the wall, stereotypical, like racist, sexist, misogynist things that some people genuinely just come out of their mouth and say straight face.
For sure.
Like, like I think some kind of course like that in high school would be good.
Beneficial. For sure. I
Yeah.
think that would be a good course to take as well. And I think also too that schools should take on the model of I guess more of like a European approach, but it's more centered to your goals. It's more centered to what your aspirations are in the future for your career and all that goodness. Because it's just a lot of things in excuse me, not college, in high school that are just not beneficial. For the most part, they say I think is it fifth grade or eighth grade level. That's all
Hmm.
you really need, or that's the average level of education um, to work in the world, right? Or what you're using basically, I guess. We're not using chemistry every day. We're not using algebra every day. Well, basic algebra we use, but I'm talking like crazy algebra, calculus, and
Calculus,
stuff like that. Like we're
integrals.
not using that, but they like make you take these classes. Like for
Mhm.
what? Unless I
Exactly.
want to be an engineer, okay, sure, that may apply, but if not, then why am I taking this class? It's pointless, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. I agree. I agree. And something else we don't do too is like, depending on where you go and where you are at in the country, certain classes and stuff really just aren't offered. Like,
Yeah.
I didn't even get in to do what I really wanted to do in high school, like pursue filmmaking, artwork, because I thought I couldn't. It wasn't even really available. There was obviously an art class, but the only art forms they were teaching were painting, drawing,
Mhm.
maybe some sculpture, but it was all really classical, really kind of old school, like by the book type stuff. And
Yeah.
if Caitlin knows my artwork, like I'm pretty much full conceptual art, video art, experimental sort of like things that are kind of new age. That wasn't even a conversation. Like, where was I even going to do that?
Yeah.
Nobody was. They would have been like, "What are you like?" The teacher wouldn't have really known what I was talking about, or maybe they would have known. They wouldn't have had the resources to teach it.
Mhm.
So it wasn't until college that I even got to expand to that point.
Yeah. I
You
feel
know.
that.
So
See, well, like the college I went to, there really wasn't that. So, if you don't know, Charleston Southern is a Christian school, and I laugh because I did not know that going to to the college. I found out the day that I moved, and that was just because of my lack of researching. Oh, the school wants me to come. I'm going to go, right? I got an acceptance later, so I'm definitely just going to go there. I didn't do any other research. So I didn't find out it was a Christian school until I got there today of moving day. But with that being said, they were very close minded, very close minded.
mhm,
So like that school was not offering like the courses that would allow conversation and or promote
mhm,
um you being an individual and exploring that, right? In a time where you need to do those things to be the adult that you ultimately want to be or that you should be, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so interesting because you're basically talking about you had a culture shock going into college. I had a culture
Mm-hmm.
shock coming out of college.
Yeah.
Like I thought everybody was awake, you know, or like had kind of a at least at least especially white people. I thought, well, at the very least, white people will at least be, you know, politically correct, PC enough to not say certain things, to not do certain things, to behave certain ways, have a level of decorum, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then when I went back, took that step back, like I was saying, after college, I came into a world where it was not, nobody had been like near Wake, had even probably heard of Wake, not even, you know, it was very baseline kind of that I don't even want to call it solid earth, but like very blue collar, very warehouse worker, very like
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, like technician type, like those type of people, and it was very it was culture shock for me because I, you know, you go once you go to WIG, you kind of get socialized in. Okay, well, the white people might be racist or they might be sexist, but they're not gonna say it to my face. So like we'll get this
Mm-hmm.
interaction. No, there are people who do not have the skills or the understanding to not say those things to your face.
For
You know.
sure.
So I was shocked on the reverse end because I was thinking everybody was gonna be kind of lily white and like nice. And that's not the truth. So yeah, Caitlin had one kind of culture shock
Yeah.
going in, and I had another culture shock coming out.
For sure. I would second that notion. It was definitely a culture shock for me. And you know, the thing is like how the exact experience, maybe not the exact experience, but the type of people that you're describing that you know, came out of college working with is exactly the people that I was in college with. They were very close minded, very like sexist, you know,
Mhm.
God told me to tell you this kind of people.
Yeah.
Um, which, you know, in my personal opinion, that's an excuse. Like, come on now. There is a level of decorum as well.
Exactly.
But
Yeah.
yeah, no, that's yeah. It was
I
definitely a
had been
culture shock.
spoiled. I
Oh, for
realized I
sure.
had been spoiled by by the white people. Like
Mhm.
I really had. Like that sounds so weird to say, but that's kind of what we were. And like even where we grew up, the white
Mhm.
people at least they knew when to they might say the N word, but they weren't gonna say it to your face. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? It was like at least a level of decorum that or, you know, they had enough sense to come in from the rain and it was like there's some people out there who just don't. And I wasn't really prepared. I didn't think I would ever have to deal with that because I was like, I went to Wake. I achieved this education status. I will be around other people who achieved same education status. And therefore there's going to be a certain social capital, a certain social understanding when we go into spaces together that we're going to respect each other at the very least, at least to our
Mhm.
faces, you know? And, you know, that's not always the case.
Yeah, no, it definitely isn't
Yeah.
at all.
And now I like I realize now I needed to understand that on some level, you know, because I'm not going to always be working with somebody who understands that.
Mhm.
I didn't know I needed to understand that, but I do now. You know,
Yeah.
like as much as painful as that experience was, I am grateful that I had I had to expand. You know, because it wasn't I didn't really struggle at Wake. I didn't because where we grew up was pretty much like Wake. Wake the
Mhm.
people at Wake were probably richer, but they were the same type of suburban, middle to upper middle class to wealthy white people. That's what
For sure.
I'm around. So I wasn't culture shock going into it. I was culture
Mhm.
shocked when I went to the not wealthy white people, the
Yeah,
not,
for
you
sure.
know, when it was just your ho hum average Joe, you know, that was when I
You
really
know,
was culture shocked.
I will agree with that because I think that could have been why CSU was a culture shock for me.
Hmm.
Well, and a lot of students that went to CSU came from like Charleston schools, which if you know anything about Charleston, South Carolina, they don't have great schools at all unless you go to private school or you live in like specific areas. So a lot of people did not go to those college, I mean, to those high schools. So it was a culture shock coming from the area that we grew up in and then going to a school that's kind of like, it's kind of like Charleston's school system, right? And that's why it was not a challenge. It didn't promote critical thinking and stuff like that, because it was, you could provide your bare minimum and that was succeeding.
Yeah.
Which that's not, at Lexington, or the school that we went to growing up, that is not succeeding. You know what I mean? You had to try a little bit more than that, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Exactly.
So yeah, we're going to wrap up this episode. So my last question for you, Courtney, is, do you still think that college is necessary for you to be successful?
You know what? I think that is 110% an individual thing. Yeah, and I will say, I'll answer it individually for me. I think for me, it has been beneficial and that it will contribute to the success I'm hoping to God I have in my life. Because I'm over this broke shit.
Right, I'm telling you.
So I think it has been beneficial for me. I will say, you have to look at what the plan is for your life, and assess whether that will, if you think college will contribute to your success or not. Or maybe you can go out and really be successful on your own, because that's totally possible as well.
Agreed.
And I think another part of that too is like, would I tell my children, if I were to have children, would I tell them to go to college? And I wouldn't do what our parents did with us, which was absolutely go 100%. You have to go because that's that's the next stage in life. I would tell them, really think about what you want to do in the end, and if college aligns with that, sure.
For sure, I agree with that.
But if not, really find out how you're going to get on that path, because that's equally as important, if not more. That's what I would say. But what do you think?
So I think that I honestly, at this point in my life, so I'm going to say this first. I think I'm going to say this for this point in my life. I'm not going to say for 10 years down the road, because it may change. But I think at this point in my life, I would say it's not necessary. And I think it's not necessary because you can be so successful in so many other ways today, without having to go to college or find other ways to, be educated in different ways outside of college nowadays, that may save you a little money, that may save you some time, a whole bunch of things, right? Some stress, all of it. But I think you really have to assess what is success to you. What do you want out of life? What do you want to be? And I don't know if those things can be answered coming straight out of college and just coming straight out of high school and then going straight into college. I think you may need some time to assess and then decide that. So I would say it's not necessary for success, while it depends on what you want to accomplish out of your life, as well as you really having a good idea of what you want to accomplish. If you don't have those things, then it's just not necessary. So I feel like right now in my life, with me being so like up in the air, like I want to try this, I want to do that, I want to just conquer the world, right? It's not necessary because I don't even know what I want to do. You know what I mean? Don't be wrong. I have a degree in public health and I love public health, but is that something I want to do long term?
Yeah.
If I don't want to do that long term, then that college degree is for what?
Agreed. And I think honestly we're both in agreement on the fact that you need to, having come out and be on the other end, we see it for what it is now, clearly, and we see that it is something you should assess in your life first before making that sort of commitment. And that's not how it was explained to us, or most people. Most people, it is, you do this because you go to college, you get married, you have a child, and it's checked off the list.
The American dream.
What most people, the American dream. And it's like, it doesn't, you need to assess. Yeah, because even speaking about the American dream, my goals never really even align with the American dream. So why was I chasing that in the first place? You know what I'm saying? So, yeah.
But like you said, we were like told that we had to go. You know what I mean? That that was
a big
an option
thing
in our household.
I mean, I remember us being like little children, 5, 6 years old, being like, okay, you're going to go to college, right?
Yeah,
you will go to college, right? And, not that we like necessarily, I didn't really problem with it necessarily, because I actually really like education. I like learning. I would be in school today. You know,
Mhm.
I'm one of those like lifelong learners. I love to read. I love to write. I do, right now. But it's just when you're kind of told that and you're pushed in that, lane, and you don't have the opportunity to really think about it so much yourself, it you can come out on the other end like we are now and be like, well, was that really worth it? You know?
For sure.
Yeah. And okay, before we go, I do have one more thing. I do want to have kind of a little, how do you
Okay.
think, um, how do you think, our discussion about college education and it being worth it, and, knowing everything we know about the debt of college and
Mhm.
all of the, well, okay, before we go to that, and I'm gonna put a pin in that because I do. We should discuss some of the pros. 'Cause I do feel like we've been talking about a lot of the cons. What are some of the things that you really feel like are really beneficial for college, and like why you should go?
I think benefit wise, um, for me, it really immersed me into life and, having realistic expectations of what life could be, right?
Mhm.
Um, I think it also brought, I guess, a level of to me, then it brought a level of opportunity that I saw really. So I think it definitely can bring you opportunities. It definitely can bring you, like challenges and things. And like, I just think that I chose the wrong school in that area. So I also think that it, can really be beneficial long term as far as like making a livable wage. I do think it can be, maybe promote happiness and stuff like that because of critical thinking. But you have to make, as well as having that degree, you have to also make the conscious effort to make those things happen as well as being able to kind of like set yourself apart. And I mean, it's not, all of those things are not solely based on the college degree. So that's what makes it hard to be like, that's a concrete pro. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's
Um,
why I think the biggest pro for me was all the interpersonal skills and the
mm,
intangibles.
yeah.
Like I think there's so much I learned just by having the opportunity to be a part of organizations, start things like, I did a web series in college, so I started a web series and really taking on the like director producer hat. That was a
Hmm.
big reason why I even came out, and made my first feature Clout coming out of college, because I already had skills. I had already had the practice in kind of a safer
Yeah.
environment of college to risk and do something like that. Even the
Hmm.
small things like making a production schedule, getting the actors, having the meetings, and, planning the screenings, all these like small things, like those skills, those intangibles and interpersonals and speaking to people and, making flyers, like, just arranging things and doing that kind of stuff. That's college allows you the space because it's its own little universe, its own little world.
Yeah.
It allows students the space to really grow and expand in those ways that the real world may or may not teach you. You might learn those eventually,
Yeah.
but you can learn them early on and very quickly in college.
Hmm.
You have to do that.
For sure. For
But
sure.
okay, so my last question, I would, and we want to put this in the context of our conversation. This is probably good. This is the last one, but to wrap up, I want to know how you think this college no college debate contributes, to the culture of like anti-intellectualism. And what I mean by that is people, since we've had like Trump and that kind of wave of like white lash, that was a big movement of anti-intellectualism rather than focusing on, you know, intelligence and focusing on, higher learning and focusing on like art and literature and critical
Hmm.
thinking. They push back against all that and they just kind of play into things like ignorance, fear,
Yeah.
emotion, and these kind of like scare tactics. They play into, if smart is bad, they're skeptical of all things that are like intelligent or that are critical. They're
Yeah.
skeptical of that because they see that as like part of like the machine or trying to take away freedoms. But
Hmm.
the opposite end of that is ignorance, fear, and they're creating these oppressive systems which keep people oppressed. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Hmm.
So, how do you think the college, no college debate fits into that?
So I think it depends on the college, right? So I feel like your college may perpetuate the idea of critical thinking and doing more and achieving more, right? But I would
Mhm.
say for CSU, I would say that it perpetuates the idea of not being an intellectual and not
Mhm.
having to think harder and more critically, right? Just
Mhm.
because it didn't, and it could be because of my background and where I came from, but it was not a challenge for me. So it just kind of like dumbed me down. It was like putting water in a soda, right?
Mhm.
So, in my experience, I would say that it did not promote me being something being an intellectual and or a critical thinker. However, I will say the higher education as a whole, uh, I would say definitely promotes um critical thinking and making wiser decisions and better options and stuff like that. Being able to immerse yourself in different cultures and social situations and stuff and sorts. Um, but I think like in my experience, it definitely promoted ignorance for sure. Definitely
Yeah.
promoted ignorance. But I did go to a Christian school where it was like, good old boy, especially in Charleston, South Carolina. That's very um good old boy state, right?
Mhm.
So versus you, on the other hand, you had a well diverse liberal college that immersed you in a lot of different things.
Yeah.
I didn't have that, so
I think, well, yeah, and I guess that's the trouble of like Christian schools like that. Like Liberty
mhm.
University is really noted for that same
Oh
kind of,
yeah.
yeah, like Liberty is like poster child for, well, basically anti, like that kind of
Yep.
vibe.
Mhm.
So, I think it does depend on what your school is and their values and how they do things, because I mean, I also went to school in the South, but Wake attracts a lot of people from all over the world, but also a lot of people from the Northeast or like, California out west. So people who really bring much more liberal ideas. Like it's pretty much a liberal Northeastern school. It's not in the middle of the South. That's pretty much what it is.
Mhm.
So, but I think the only trouble with, if we take away higher education, or if we sort of look down on higher education or whatever, the issue is then ignorance does run rampant.
Yeah,
And when you have ignorance, you allow the Charleston Southerns, the Liberty Universities to be the main voice. And it's like,
for sure.
that is absolutely not the voice
Yeah,
that we want to be listening to, because that voice has, unfortunately, at one point in time was the only voice.
for sure.
And it was the voice that was the most oppressive to people who were not pretty much white male
Which
and
makes me
Christian.
question, why won't they teach those things in like high school? You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Like,
Exactly.
why not teach those things where everybody can learn? Because everybody has to go to high school unless you
Hmm.
drop out or whatever the case is. But teach those things in the mandatory parts of school, right? Not wait until you get to college when you can make a choice whether you want to be there or not, and or retain the information, and or you just want to regurgitate it and pass a test.
Exactly.
Like that's one of the things you need to be teaching a child so that they can become an adult that is productive to our society.
I agree. I 110% agree, because I
You
think
should not wait till college.
I agree with that. Because you get into, at that point, then you get into the ignorance, and you
Mhm.
have a whole class of adults who are operating pretty much from ignorance, unless somebody comes
Absolutely.
along and or they decide to be different.
Mhm.
And by that, a lot of times, by the time they decide to be different, they're 60, 70 years old, and
Yep.
have done their damage in the world.
Exactly. And,
So,
and at that point, at 60, 70 years old, they're stuck in their ways. You know what I mean? Like they could care less. It's only what
mhm,
benefits them at that point.
exactly. And I think celebrating anti-intellectualism, like not trying to be intellectual, I think that is incredibly dangerous. I think that is like, that's pretty much what starts to become a dictatorship at that point.
For sure.
um and you can actually go back through history and look at certain dictators who their agenda was to like systemically get rid of intellectual things. Like they would attack artists who were saying something critical of the government. They would get rid of certain books. They would, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
anything that was encouraging people to actually think on their own for themselves,
Mhm.
anything that would put the government in a bad light, get rid of groupthink. they were ready to destroy, to ban.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about somebody like Trump, who was really pushing that dictator line,
Oh yeah,
like pretty hardcore,
for
you
sure.
know, the kind of stuff, the rhetoric he was saying, like he even like dumbed down a lot of his rhetoric to just simple kind of hate speech things. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Just
And the
very.
funny thing is, because he really appealed to a mass variety of people, I wonder if that's what attracted people. Like it wasn't
I
above
think
their
so.
head.
Yeah, and the thing is, because intellectualism, I'm realizing among like blue collar, the average person, the average man who votes for Trump, they
Mm-hmm.
see intellectualism as somebody trying to like be somebody trying to be better than them,
Yeah.
or they
Mm-hmm.
see it as that's unattainable for me. So I'm not gonna try to. So I'm gonna actually go the opposite direction and like try to demean you as much as possible or
For
demean your
sure.
lifestyle as much as possible. So I think that was a big reason why Trump even really was successful and came into office is because he tapped into a huge audience, a huge market of people
Mm-hmm.
who really are skeptical of intellectualism, and it's because they couldn't achieve intellectualism. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
For
In their
sure.
lives, or they don't value it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like I was saying, my first job, they don't value education. They don't. I would hear them literally be like, when they knew certain other, coworkers were going to college or whatever, they'd be like, oh, well, so and so is going to be leaving because they're going to college. They see it as if somebody goes to college and tries to attempt to better themselves, they will leave, but we're going to create our own little group of people who hates on them because they're leaving,
Yeah.
because they're
Mm-hmm.
going to, quote, do better than us, or they're
For
going
sure.
to outachieve us. So I think Trump was really able to rally the like angry, disenfranchised, we didn't go to college, we never achieved that goal, the anti-intellectual skepticals, reactionary people. He was able to yeah, seriously, he was able to really rally them because
For sure.
other political groups were not doing that. They were focusing
For sure.
solely on the college educated, the minority groups, the people who were liberal, or who at least pretended to be liberal.
Mm-hmm.
They were focusing on that group of people and leaving out this massive group of people who are
Yeah.
over here absolutely not a part of that.
And which,
Yeah.
to say this, I would say that group is the majority as well, especially from including like the generations that are currently still alive today, like your baby boomers who are a majority and stuff like that,
Mhm.
who are able to vote as well. That is the majority of that group. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
when I tell you he appealed to the masses, he definitely, even the African American masses who are not educated, um, even appeal to them. So
Yeah.
he definitely, that could have been his tactic in, pulling those people in for their vote for him and his support. So
I absolutely agree. I think that was a part of his plan. And like, to his credit, that wasn't actually a very smart strategic move.
it was,
Ironically enough,
that's one thing.
he
I
like
don't think Trump is as dumb as he let off.
I don't think so either. I think he pretends to rally his base. Like, his
For
base
sure.
are the non-intellectuals. His base, I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to call them dumb, but his base are the people who barely skated out of high school type people, or
Yeah.
if they went and graduated at all. You know, his base are those people. And the thing is, those people tend to be a blue collar white man.
Yeah. For sure.
That's who it usually is. So that's why it ends up. That's why you can associate a Trump with a angry white man,
Yeah.
because that's who he directly tailored a lot of his campaign, a lot of his speech, you know, was really tailored to them. Which also begs the question, and we got to wrap it because we are getting kind of into a lot of time here. But um, as it begs the question, it's like, if Trump's tactic, and he knew he would be successful with the appealing to your average to below average, I would say mostly your below average person. If he's looking to appeal to that person and he's using racism, fear, sexism, misogyny to that, if that is what is considered anti-intellectualism, why would we as a society allow that to take precedence over anti-intellectualism? Because we will all suffer under that.
Yeah,
Most of
and
us will suffer.
honestly think though too, this just like you said, those people at work, there's like, that person goes and gets their college degree, and they're like, oh my God, you're going to get your college degree. Oh, he's not going to work here anymore. It's like they're like, it's like that jealousy. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you think you're better
Yeah,
than me,
I think
kind
it's
of
coming from
thing.
anger. I think it's a
So
lot of anger. It's a lot of, I couldn't do it, so I'm going to try to put you down.
yeah, or
It's a
you
lot
shouldn't
of,
have just because I don't have it.
just because I don't have. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a lot of that.
For sure.
Or a lot of, oh, you think, and it's like, if somebody goes and really does try to expand themselves, what is the problem with that? That
Yeah.
ultimately helps you, you know what I mean? But they don't see
Mhm.
it that way. You know, they really see it as, oh, someone's just trying to be better than me. And I think it's a self-esteem insecurity thing,
For sure.
but I think that's what, you know, the Trumps of the world play into, and that's what they they want a group of people who support them in that negativity, which is
Mhm.
mind blowing to me. Rather than just
Yeah.
lift yourself up out of, you know, do what you tell everybody else to do, bootstrap it, work your way up, work your way out. Rather than just do that, you you know you sit and try to find people to sit in your negativity,
Yep.
and that ended up taking over the nation for 4 years, and it's still a problem. It's
Oh
still
yeah.
widespread, you know.
Oh yeah.
So I think intellectualism has its own issues. You can get to a point where you're thinking too much, I guess.
Yeah.
But anti-intellectualism is not the answer to that. It is
Yeah, I agree
absolutely
with that.
not.
I do
Yeah,
think there has to be a level of education at the minimum. I just wish we would could center education more to be beneficial for, the students and the people entering the workforce. However, I think if we had nothing, just keep this current system. We can't have nothing, or you would have a dictatorship 100%.
a dictatorship.
So, you know, it you know, there's a fine line here with education for sure.
Hmm.
A very fine line that you're walking when you entertain the education conversation. So, I
Yes,
think if they redistributed what they're teaching and focus on different things, then we would be having a society that is more beneficial for the greater good, right? But I also think too that they don't want anything different because they want to produce um, people who are not educated so that they can just have them follow the corporate America model, right?
exactly. Yeah,
And not seek higher education so they can fall into these jobs that are minimum paying, um, benefits lacking, and all types of things like that. So it works for this model they currently have, definitely works for corporate America making money and exploiting our current society.
yeah, I would agree. I think that's part of it too. Is like the education system that we do have, they exploit that as well
Oh
for
yeah.
their own gain.
Oh yeah.
You know, because it is that sit at a desk, take a test. It's very task oriented versus,
Mhm.
applying knowledge and, you know, versus goal oriented.
Mhm.
It's very just like when you go to a job. Here's a job, do it, do the next one. Here's a
Yep.
job, do it, do the next one. And it's like a never ending cycle.
Mhm.
The only thing good I can say about at least high school is, or schooling, is at least you get a grade, and it can accumulate to something bigger, like maybe going to college. In the work world, you just do a task, do it again, get paid. Do a
Yep.
task, do it again, get paid. It's like this like task reward system that they're trying to replicate in schools. And then, they're not encouraging you to apply that knowledge to build something
Mhm.
for yourself. Because when you build something for
Exactly.
yourself, then you don't have to sit at a desk.
Exactly.
So I think that's what scares them about it, really.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that was a great discussion
Agreed.
on education. Is our very first podcast, but so many more to come. We've already planned out like a million.
Yes.
So, um,
Literally.
you know, um, we're really looking forward to these weekly discussions. We got so much more. Anything you want to say about your first episode?
Yeah, no, I think it was an awesome discussion. I think, obviously our experiences are different. Even though we are twins, our experiences are very different. So that shapes our opinions on this. And this does not mean that, you base your decisions off of what we have said. Um, you obviously do your own research and seek out what's best for you.
Yes, get that
However, I
disclaimer in
will
there.
say this is an awesome conversation that we promote you having in your households and your home and all of those things like that,
Or
so
even
that
just
you
with
can see if
yourself.
yeah, or yourself, so you can see if college is the perfect fit for you, or if the education system is benefiting you, right? But yeah, thank you for tuning in. This is our first episode. Super excited to um, get let you guys listen to this. as well as future episodes to come. So we got some really, really cool topics coming up. Some fun topics, some more serious topics. But yeah, super, super excited to share this with you guys.
Yeah, and just so you know, we're gonna, post obviously about it on social media and things like that. But just so you know, it's gonna be regularly uploaded on not Saturday, sorry, Fridays, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, 4:30 p.m. Western time. So you want to make sure that you can get it on Spotify and Radio Public right now, but we're working on some other ones. So,
Mm-hmm.
be on the lookout for those. But those are going to be the big streaming platforms. Oh, and YouTube, we're making visuals for these as well. So
Yeah.
it'll be like mainly just the audio, but we'll have a little visual with it. So you can, if you like to listen to things on YouTube, I like listening to YouTube actually, oddly enough, fun fact about me. Um, I listen to a lot of like commentators and stuff on YouTube or, just stuff like that. So we'll have it, for purely audio formats, but also a visual format as well. So make sure you guys remember that date. We'll be uploading them, coming up with new topics. Just have a good time. I hope this conversation really got you thinking today and that it really got you thinking about, where you fit in with education or where your opinions are on education. If you see it as something for yourself, or if you're like, you know what, I'm gonna go out into the real world and like hustle it up, figure out how I'm gonna make it on my own. Both totally valid reasons. Both things most of us have to do at some point in our lives. So,
Yes.
so yeah, well, we'll wrap it up right there. Have a good night. Enjoy yourself. Stay safe. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.